what is that ending? We need to talk about the end of The Beasting. First, I'll give some brief overall thoughts about my reaction to this novel before diving into spoiler territory and giving you my theory about that ending. I have a theory. I've been somewhat hesitant to pick up Paul Murray's new novel, not because of its 600 plus page length, but because I'd read his previous novel, The Mark and the Void, and it was a bit of a disappointment to me. It had an interesting concept, but I felt it didn't have much heart. Conversely, The Beasting is filled with so much emotional tension, I was riveted. It also has an increasingly suspenseful story and meaningfully explores a number of issues. And Murray makes a very bold choice with that ending, which has got a lot of readers talking. My online book club has been discussing this novel for the past month, and it's so interesting hearing everyone's point of view about it. This novel is a big, contemporary family saga set in a small Irish town. We follow the multiple perspectives of the Barnes family over a specific period of time. They're going through a crisis as a family, as well as having their own serious individual issues which might take them over the edge. It deals with economic instability, environmental decline, the sometimes repressive nature of communities, infidelity, internal and external homophobia, and the silences which exist within a home when families aren't honest with each other and themselves. This is all couched within a very dramatic plot with many mysteries and misdirects which make it increasingly thrilling to read. It's so clever how Murray focuses on the perspectives of all the family members to sympathetically portray their different points of view. I was convinced by each of their stories, moving from teenager Cassandra to adolescent PJ to mother Imelda to the father Dickie. Even when I had something like a complete portrait, there were still a lot of gaps and misunderstandings which are dealt with in the final section of the novel. As well as creating suspense, this gives a strong sense for how so many conflicts and contradictions can occur within one family. Though this appears to be a normal family from the outside and they broadly support one another, there's a lack of emotional openness and an increasing number of lies which fill this household. And even the title of this novel is a lie. It begins to feel like an absurd situation that they can live within such close physical proximity to each other and still have so much psychological distance from one another that it's like they literally don't see each other anymore. There's also a deep tragedy to this because knowing what we come to know about each family member's inner life, we know that if they opened up to each other, they could start to really help each other in meaningful ways. This novel shows that this is such a common state of affairs for families to fall into and how it can lead to great heartache and potential tragedy. There are so many details within this novel that could be discussed at length, but one of the most striking things about it, which any readers who completes this novel will want to talk about, is that ending. I'll get into spoilers here because it's impossible not to if I'm going to explain my own theory about it, so be warned. Don't continue watching this video unless you've completed this novel or you don't care about it being spoiled. If you have finished the novel, you know the noteworthy thing about this novel's ending is that it gives no conclusion. Dickie and his friend Victor are hidden in the forest preparing to shoot the man who has been blackmailing Dickie. Meanwhile, his children and wife Imelda are separately trying to find him even though it's night and there's a torrential rainstorm. Just as there's a click where Dickie might shoot one or all of them, the novel ends. So this later section has switched to a second-person narrative with lines attributed to different characters. The final line of this novel simply states, "You are doing this for love," which you and what this is remains unknown. The ambiguity of the ending is in many ways the point of this book. It prompts us to reflect about our own family life and why honest communication is difficult, but necessary. I guess it's admirable if you're a reader who is willing to leave the story where Murray chose to end it and not wonder about the conclusion to this very tense scene. However, I am not that reader. I can't help speculating about what happens in the moment after this novel ends. Having grown to intensely care about these characters and intimately know their lives over hundreds and hundreds of pages, I can't help wondering what happens next in their story. Here are two likely scenarios that I envision. Vicky and or Victor unintentionally or intentionally shoot one or all members of the family, prompting Dickie to then shoot himself and or Victor. Or that a shot is fired and misses the family, creating a moment of nearly averted crisis and the beginnings of more open communication, a reconciliation between the family members that Imelda, Cass, and PJ were hoping to start by finding Dickie. There are an infinite number of variations and a mixture of these events which could also occur. However, we can speculate about likely outcomes given certain details and foreshadowing which have come before. To start with, there's the very first line in this novel. In the next town over, a man had killed his family. This local tragedy casts a shadow over the story as this unknown family and their now empty house becomes the subject of gossip and morbid intrigue. It's poignant thinking that if things also end in tragedy for the Barnes family, they'd likely become just another subject of gossip for the community. In fact, they already have been with their failing business and the corruption surrounding it. However, this local legend also conveys the sense that Dickie might shoot his family and himself. This is reinforced by Dickie's later conversation with Victor, where Victor says that the only way to be sure to keep Dickie secret from his family is to kill them. Eilish, a member of my online book club, made this really interesting point that at the beginning of the novel, Cass is very anxious about climate change, and in the end, when all of the members of the family become lost in the forest, it's like the environment itself is threatening their lives. There's also the character of Imelda's Aunt Rose, or her adopted aunt, who apparently has psychic abilities, and in her delirious state seems to be warning about a forthcoming tragedy. She stresses to Imelda that Cass shouldn't return, and she refers to a squirrel that could be PJ. Additionally, when Cass and PJ were younger, they'd play a game in the forest where they were squirrels being hunted by their father, and the very last line from any of the characters is from Cass referring to this. So every sign seems to be pointing to a tragic conclusion which is about to occur. However, I have a theory that things might actually continue in a more positive direction for this family. Murray has structured this novel in a way that many sections end with a cliffhanger. Chapters that focus on a particular character end with this sense that something really bad is about to occur. This is partly what makes this book such a compulsive read despite its considerable length. But when we finally find out the result of these suspenseful moments, it often turns out to be okay. The threat that Murray has created dissipates and the story continues. In doing so, I think the author is saying that our lives can often veer towards tragedy, but we don't often go over the edge of the cliff. I think Murray has been steadily preparing us for this final moment of crisis, and if we continue with this line of logic, no one would be fatally shot. There might be panic, someone might be wounded, but being pushed to the brink of destruction, I think, would cause this family to finally start being honest with each other and moving towards positive changes together, because after all, they are connected by love. That's my take. What do you think? Do you agree with my speculation? Do you have a more tragic outlook? Or are there any major clues which I didn't talk about? We'll never know for certain how their story ends, and I think the lack of resolution is poignant. I believe Murray made the right decision in not giving us a firm conclusion, But I know some readers have felt very differently and have been very frustrated by this. There's a whole other level of discussion to be had about this ending. Does it rely too much on coincidence? Is it believable that Imelda, Cass, and PJ would all suddenly have a change of heart and suddenly care about Dickie when previously they had ignored or dismissed him? I think, like a lot of dramatic plots, it relies on some contrivances. But personally, I can forgive that because it made the story so engaging and ultimately produces a powerful message. But again, I'd be curious to hear what you think. Thank you for listening to me discuss this novel. I hope you found it as moving and as gripping as I did. Will it win this year's Booker? It's tough to say. I think it has a strong chance, but time will tell. I hope you're doing well, and I will speak to you again soon.